What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Still trying to fit this floor in the Veloster, and I'm test fitting the dash because I don't know if this is going to work as far as where the dash is sitting, because this thing's sitting so far forward. I may wind up having to cut the firewall off of the Veloster floor and put it onto the Genesis floor so that I can use the Veloster dash, because this thing ain't fitting worth a damn. So let me flip this around and show you what I got. The other thing that I have an issue with is the brake booster is going to be hitting the rain tray in between the strut towers if I use the Genesis firewall. So I don't know, I may have to step back and regroup and figure out what I'm going to do to make this work. But I'm going to flip the camera around and show you what I'm actually seeing. So I've got the floor set in here, and it's set all the way back where it's supposed to be. You can see it's a little bit wide. The shock towers are a little bit wider. It's 2 inches wider on the shock tower. But that dash is sticking out a lot. And then there's a big old gap in between the dash and the windshield. So I have a feeling what I'm gonna have to wind up doing is I'm probably gonna have to cut the floor here across, and then cut the front section out of that and weld the two of them together to make it to where I can put the Veloster dash in here, because I really wanted to use this dash because I like how it looks, but it's too wide and I don't think it's going to sit right. So I'm going to have to move all the electronics out of this dash into the other dash. I have to get the firewall to where I can put the other dash in there and go from there. But yeah, this does not look like it's going to work the way that I'm trying to do it. So I'm going to regroup, figure out what I'm going to do, and I'll pick back up after I figure out what I'm going to do. So I've got the subframe fit onto the chassis, and I've got the chassis set up pretty close to where it belongs. The bolts for the struts are actually pushing the chassis forward about a ½ inch when I push the shocks up into the position. I'm still debating on what I want to do to get this working correctly. I thought that I was going to be able to do the full floor swap, and now it's looking like that's not going to be a very good idea, simply because of the way the dashboard's going to line up. But I need to make sure that the steering's going to work the way that I'm thinking about doing it. So you can see here, the steering right here now comes from here and goes up into that hole right there. On the Veloster, it comes almost straight up into... I'll show you on this one. It comes almost straight up into this piece right here. So I don't know if there's enough clearance with the engine in there for the steering shaft to come up that high, that straight. So what I'm probably going to have to do is I'm probably going to have to put the motor into the freaking subframe and check clearances as far as being able to measure from the back of the engine to the firewall and see how much room I've got, and see what I can work with. And I may wind up taking this part of the firewall and then taking the entire firewall around, and then I'll cut it back probably to about here, maybe a little bit further, and then section it in where I need to, and I'll create an overlap between this floor and the floor in the Genesis, or not the floor in the Genesis, the floor out of the Genesis that's in the Veloster. I'll create a little lip to give it some structural support. But then I can put this back in. I hate that I cut the damn thing out now. But I still had to do the shock towers and everything, and I still needed the frame rail, so it's not a lost cause. I still had to do what I did to the Genesis. I didn't necessarily have to do what I did to the Veloster, but what's done is done. I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm going to look at how to do this the best way with the best looking finish. I was originally going to do the Genesis dash because the way I like it, the way it looked, I liked how it looked. But I'm going to go, I've already stripped the Genesis dash, took all the wiring off of it. So there's the metal dash, there's the heat and air assembly, and then there's the dashboard itself. I'm still going to have to figure out how to put the torque meter into the Veloster dash. And I'm also going to have to figure out how I'm going to put the key fob into the Veloster dash. Other than that, it should be pretty straightforward. I'm gonna have to modify the wiring to get it to fit onto the Veloster metal frame. But all the plugs on the AC unit seem to be the same. They may be in different locations, but the connectors look the same and the wiring looks the same. And if I have to, I can use these cases. Like I can switch the motor out and run this motor off of this unit. But I think the motors are the same. So I could switch this unit out, and that's one of my electrical connectors. And then the varistor for the heating element, I can swap that out if I have to, which I shouldn't have to. And then the blend door and the fresh air vent door, they both have the same style connectors, so I shouldn't have to change those out either. So I should be able to just relocate where the connectors are on the Veloster dash. And then I'm going to have to redo how the fuse panel is, because on the fuse panel on the Genesis, it's in the door opening. So you open the door and it's on the side right here. And on the Veloster, it's up here in the front, as most of you know. So I'm more than likely going to wind up having to use the Veloster pedals. I've been playing around with the pedals, the firewall, the steering shafts, trying to figure out what's going to be the best solution. And there's no way I would have been able to figure this out with the chassis still in the car. I needed to do what I did in order to figure all this out. This is a learning experience. I've never done this before, so I'm going to just keep on trucking like I have been, and we'll see where this takes me. But I think what I'm going to do, I actually think I'm going to leave all of this hooked up, and I'm going to just trim the frame rail, and then I'll weld it to the side of that frame rail. That way I'll have my exact position of where I need the front end. I mean, that could change. I honestly don't know what I'm going to do yet. I haven't decided. I honestly don't know. I don't know yet. It's still a work in progress. All right, guys, it's been cold and raining for the last 2 days. We got a little bit of sunshine today, but it's still cold. So I haven't been able to do a whole lot of work to the car, but I'm getting ready to put what I've been mulling over ideas on how to make this work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the motor into the subframe in the front of the chassis, take some measurements and see if I can scoot the floor forward 6 inches, because the wheelbase difference between the Veloster and the Genesis is 6 inches. If I can move the firewall, and the difference that I'm seeing in the dash is about 6 inches. So if I can move the firewall forward 6 inches and get the dash to sit where it did in the Veloster, what I'll do is I'll remove the entire floor from the 2 frame rails. I'll weld in some reinforcements in the back of the frame rails and in the middle, and I'll leave the subframe bolted up, and I'll leave the strut bar on here, and I'll leave the cross member for where the steering shaft is, and I'll notch out the frame, move the bar where the steering shaft goes through forward 6 inches, and that'll be what sets everything for the rest of the floor. And if I do that, then that makes it to where I don't have to cut any out of the floor from the firewall to the rear subframe mounts for the Genesis, and I'll be able to use almost the entire floor out of the Genesis. It'll make it a lot easier. I'll be able to put the back seats from the Genesis, the bottom of the back seat from the Genesis in here, and then I'll probably just get custom made upholstery for the upper back seats. If I even put back seats in here, I haven't decided if I'm going to put back seats in here or not. It's really going to be determined on how the roll cage goes, because once I get the floor fit in the front and rear, and I get everything to where it's a rolling body, then I'm going to take it and get somebody to put a roll cage in here. I'm not going to do it myself because I want it certified. So I'll get a certified cage put in here, and then I'll finish building it. But that's my plan so far. I'm going to put the engine in here, get some measurements. If I can, I'm going to completely separate the floor from the frame rails, notch the frame rails so that I can bring the floor forward 6 inches, weld everything back in, shorten the frame rails by 6 inches, and weld the nubs back on the ends, and then weld the whole thing into the car. It should work out pretty good as long as I can section the floor as deep as I need to. So we'll find out. All right, so I have the engine and transmission back in the car, and I've been taking some measurements, and it looks like I should be able to get roughly 4 to 4.5 inches out right here. which would still leave me about 2 inches shy of being able to get the floor to fit without modifying anything else. So I will have to wind up taking 2 inches from somewhere else. More than likely will come out of here. And yeah, so what I'm going to wind up doing is I'm going to remove the firewall and remove the floor off the frame rails. Then I will wind up moving this brace forward and get it set into place to where I can get it as close to the motor as possible without interfering with anything. And then after I get that set, then that'll determine how much I need to cut out of the floor or out of the rails to get the floor to fit. And then I'll push everything forward. And then I'm going to use the very top of the Veloster floor or firewall, and I'm going to use the edges. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cut the Veloster firewall right here along the edge, and I'm not going to get into anywhere any of the pedals go, and I'll cut it straight across, and then I'll seam it onto this, and that way I can have it match up to the car the way that it's supposed to. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of work. It's not anything that's going to happen overnight, but that's basically where I'm at right now. I did check the steering angle, and I'm able to run the steering pretty much straight up and down right here. So moving that forward to about right here will not be an issue. The other thing would be the length, and I'll play with that after I get the floor set and get the dash in here. But it looks like everything else is going to work. And if I needed to, I had thought about trying to bring the engine forward a little bit, but in order to do that, I would have to relocate the oil filter, and I think the steering rack would interfere. I'm not 100% certain because I haven't gotten underneath this thing. But I'm going to go ahead and get some measurements, get this cleaned up to where I can get this firewall off of this rail so that I can move that rail. I'm going to leave the floor on it until I get this rail moved. I'll get that rail moved forward, figure out exactly where I can get it to sit, and then everything's going to be based off of where that rail sits as far as how far forward I can run the floor. Then the remainder that I have to take out, like I said, will come out between here and here. I'll take 2 inches out and shrink the floor a little bit, and we'll do it like that. And then I'll wind up having to take some off the front part of the drive shaft and some off the back half of the drive shaft, and it should balance out pretty easy. So I'm hoping. I haven't even talked to a drive shaft company yet, but there's a couple local ones here in Atlanta, so I should be able to find somebody that can do it for me. But that's way off in the future. I got to get the floor done and get all this back into the car before I'm even worried about that. So the other thing that this is going to do is this is going to make it to where I have to modify the shifter. So I'm going to have to shorten the shifter however much I move the floor forward, which should be relatively easy with this. I'll have to probably make a new bracket for the top, and I'll have to shorten the arm, but it should be relatively straightforward. It shouldn't be anything major. So yeah, that's going to be my two major obstacles, is getting that moved forward and then getting the floor separated from the frame. I'll have to weld in supports so that the frame rails don't move, and then I'll remove the frame rails from the floor. I'll remove the engine and transmission and everything from the car. I'll remove the subframe, and then I'll flip the floor over and put it on sawhorses, and I'll clean where the frame rails weld onto the floor. Instead of separating the floor into all these little separate pieces, I'll just disconnect the rails and leave the floor assembled. And I'll drill out the bolts or the welds that I need to, and then put braces over top of those so that I can get to them before I weld. Take the whole floor off, cut the frame rails up here wherever they need to be cut, however they need to be cut, and then move the floor forward, weld it back in. And then my seat locations will still be correct for the dashboard. I should still be able to use the Genesis dash, which is what I want to do. I really, really want to use the Genesis dash. So just because I like the way that it looks and I like the center console that's on it, if I have to use the Veloster dash, it's not that big of a deal, but I would really like to use the Genesis dash. And if I do use the Genesis dash, I'm still going to have to cut the sides off of it to shrink it, but I'll be able to make it work. I'll figure something out. But that's essentially where the car is right now. This is going to be a lot of work, and it's been really cold and rainy. So it's been really cold and rainy the last couple days. Really haven't been able to get a whole lot of work done to this car at all because of the weather. So I'm going to try and do a pretty fair amount of work on this thing during the week this week when I can. And then next week I'll hopefully have the floor off of the frame rails and modifying where all that stuff sits. If I can get a lot done during the week, I may even be at the point where I'm putting the floor back onto the frame rails. But we'll have to just see how it goes. With the weather getting cold, it's not as easy to work on this stuff out here in the dirt as it was during the summertime. Not that it was easy during the summertime, but it was easier than it is now. So, but yeah, I appreciate everybody tuning into the build. Really thankful for everybody that's checking out the channel and helping it grow. And like always, if this video helped you out in any way, which I don't think it did, but if you enjoyed what you watched, which I hope you did, or you learned anything from it just from seeing me screw up and readjust my position, give me a like, follow, comment, subscribe, whatever, and I'll check y'all out in the next video. Have a great one.